By the second morning, the mansion no longer felt like a stranger's house. It felt like a stage. Every hallway a corridor of choices, every look from the staff a silent question. Who are you and why are you here? Maya dressed in her own clothes again, jeans and a plain hoodie, a deliberate contrast to the elegance around her. She wanted to remember who she was, to anchor herself against the quiet pull this place exerted on her. She stared at herself in the mirror, whispered, "You're leaving today." And for the first time, the words didn't sound like a plea. They sounded like a decision. She found Damien in the courtyard near the fountain. He was talking to two men in dark suits, his voice low but sharp, each gesture controlled with the precision of someone used to being obeyed. The morning light cut across his profile, hardening his features. He wasn't the man who had brought her coffee. He was the man the city whispered about. The men nodded and left quickly, leaving him alone by the stone balustrade. When his eyes found her, the usual guarded amusement flickered there. But this time, she met it without flinching. "We need to talk," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "Good morning to you too." "I'm leaving," she said, stepping closer. The words didn't tremble. "I appreciate the hospitality, but this isn't my world. I have a family, a job, a life. Whatever this is, it ends now." For a heartbeat, something unreadable crossed his face. Then he set his hands on the cold stone, exhaled slowly, and said, "Do you really think it's that simple?" "It has to be," she shot back. "Because if it's not, then you're not the man you pretended to be last night." The words hung between them, sharp as broken glass. Damien's gaze hardened, but not with anger, with a quiet conflict she hadn't seen before. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Maya, when you scratched that car, you didn't just damage a piece of metal. That car is watched, tracked. People saw you with me. My rivals saw you with me. The police saw you on my cameras. In their eyes, whether you like it or not, you're part of my world now." Her stomach twisted. "Then tell them I'm not. I'm nobody." He shook his head slowly. "In my world, there's no such thing as nobody once you're seen." She crossed her arms, chin lifting. "Then maybe it's time someone broke your world's rules." For a moment, silence stretched between them. A battle of wills with no raised voices, no threats, just two people refusing to bend. Then unexpectedly, Damien smiled. Not the cold, calculated smile of a man who always wins, but the quiet, almost proud smile of someone who recognizes a worthy opponent. "You're not afraid of me anymore," he said. "I never was," she replied, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. She was afraid, but not of him. She was afraid of what being near him was doing to her. Before either could say more, Luca approached quickly, his expression serious. "Signore Rossi," he said in Italian before switching to English for Maya's sake. "They're here." Damien's posture shifted instantly, the subtle, dangerous calm of a man stepping into a storm. "Who?" he asked. "DeLuca's men. They're at the gate. They say they just want to talk." Maya didn't know who DeLuca was, but the way Luca said the name made the air feel heavier. Damien straightened his jacket, eyes narrowing. "Of course they are," he murmured. "They saw her arrive. And now they want to know why." He turned to Maya, his voice low but firm. "You stay here. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, do not leave this courtyard." Her heart pounded. "Damien, stay," he repeated with a finality that made the world still. Then he walked toward the gates, flanked by two of his men. Maya watched as the large iron gates opened to reveal a convoy of black cars. Men in suits stepped out, their movements synchronized, their expressions sharp. At their center was a man with silver hair slicked back, his suit immaculate, his smile polite in the way a knife can be polished. Even from a distance, Maya could feel the tension crackling between the two sides. It wasn't a meeting. It was a standoff dressed in expensive clothes. She couldn't hear every word, but she saw the body language. The way Damien stood slightly forward, owning the ground. The way DeLuca gestured casually like a man who wanted to test boundaries without firing a shot. At one point, DeLuca's eyes flicked past Damien, toward her. The smile that curved his lips was slow and calculating. Maya's breath caught. She understood then, she wasn't just an inconvenience. She was a question mark in their world, and in places like this, question marks were dangerous. Damien's men tensed as DeLuca stepped closer, speaking in a low voice that carried just enough for the wind to catch fragments. "Girl. Delivery. Weakness." Damien's expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. He responded evenly, his hand resting on the railing like a coiled snake, ready. Whatever DeLuca had implied, it wasn't friendly. The conversation ended with curt nods, the kind that promised nothing was resolved. The cars left as silently as they arrived. When Damien returned to the courtyard, his calm exterior was intact, but something in his eyes had shifted. A calculation, a decision forming. They know, he said simply. Know what? Maya asked, her voice unsteady. That you exist, he replied. And now they'll want to know why. She stared at him, realization dawning like a slow, cold sunrise. You said I could leave, he met her gaze. I said you were safe here. Out there, I can't guarantee that anymore. It wasn't a threat. It was a truth laid bare between them like an unbridgeable river. The first morning, rays slipped through the tall curtains of the guest room, casting golden streaks across the quilt and illuminating the heavy wooden furniture. Maya woke to the silence of wealth. No honking horns, no neighbors' arguments through paper-thin walls, no blaring sirens. Only the distant hum of life beyond the mansion's gates and the faint rustle of servants moving quietly down the halls. For a moment she lay still, staring at the ceiling, letting herself imagine she was anywhere else. But the ache in her chest reminded her. She wasn't in her world anymore. She was in his. She rose, pulling the curtain aside to look out at the sprawling garden. The grass glistened with dew, and roses climbed along wrought iron trellises. It was beautiful, but not free. The high stone walls surrounding the property were a reminder that beauty here came with boundaries. She exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the glass. Today, she whispered again, her mantra from the night before. Today I leave. A knock came at the door before she could turn away. It wasn't tentative. It was polite, measured, the kind of knock from someone used to being obeyed. She froze, her heart skipping, then called, "Yes?" The door opened and Damien himself stepped in. He didn't knock twice, didn't wait for permission. He wore a dark shirt with the sleeves rolled, revealing strong forearms, and his presence filled the room as easily as sunlight filled the window. He carried 2 cups of coffee, the rich scent wrapping around her before he even crossed the threshold. "Good morning," he said calmly, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. As if a Mafia boss delivering coffee to a delivery girl who scratched his Lamborghini wasn't absurd. He handed her one of the cups. "I wasn't sure how you'd take it, so I left it black." Maya hesitated, then accepted it with both hands. The porcelain felt warm against her fingers. "Thank you," she said cautiously, as though politeness might shield her. He settled into the chair by the window, sipping his own coffee. His movements were unhurried, precise, as though every second was exactly as he intended it. He looked at her over the rim of his cup. "You didn't sleep much," she blinked, caught off guard. "How do you know that?" "You have shadows under your eyes," he said simply. "And I've lived long enough to know what restless sleep looks like." He set the cup down on the small table beside him. "Dreams?" Her chest tightened. "Nightmares," she admitted before she could stop herself. He nodded, not mocking, not pitying. "Just listening. This house has that effect on people the first night," he said. "Too many stories in the walls." She crossed her arms, coffee still in hand. "Then maybe you should let me leave." His gaze sharpened, but his tone remained even. "And where would you go, Maya? Back to your apartment where your brother waits? Back to delivering food for people who don't remember your face after the door closes?" The words hit harder than she expected. Her instinct was to lash back, to defend her life, her choices. But there was no mockery in his voice, no disdain. He spoke like someone who had seen her world, who knew it, maybe even respected it, but also saw beyond it. She forced her chin up. "At least it's my life. My choices." Damien leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees, eyes never leaving hers. "That's what you don't understand yet. Your choices stopped being only yours the moment you scratched my car. You stepped into my world, and now whether you like it or not, the lines have blurred." Her breath caught. The way he said it wasn't a threat. It was fact. Cold, unshakable. And it terrified her more than anything else he could have said. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was thick, heavy with the weight of what was unspoken. Then unexpectedly, Damien's expression shifted, softer, contemplative. "Do you know why I didn't send you away last night?" he asked quietly. She shook her head, her throat dry. "Because in all the years I've been in this world, surrounded by people who either fear me or want something from me, you're the first person who walked into my life without either. He paused, his gaze locking onto hers. You didn't want anything. You didn't plan this. And still, you stood there ready to take responsibility for something that would have crushed most people. The admission left Maya unsettled. She wasn't sure if it was a compliment, a warning, or both. She wanted to deny it, to insist she wasn't strong, she was just stubborn. But something in his tone told her he had already seen through the defenses she hadn't even realized she had. She set the coffee down, her hands trembling slightly. You don't know me, she whispered. No, he agreed. But I want to. The honesty in his voice was more dangerous than any threat. It wasn't the words themselves. It was the way he said them, with a steadiness that made it clear he wasn't used to wanting things he couldn't control. Maya's chest tightened. She didn't know what frightened her more, that she was trapped in his world, or that a part of her was starting to wonder what it would mean to be seen by him. The guest room they gave her was nothing like anything Maya had ever stepped into before. It wasn't ostentatious like the mansion's grand halls. It was elegant in a quiet way, like a space meant to be lived in rather than shown off. Heavy curtains framed tall windows overlooking the garden, where faint lantern lights glowed like fireflies scattered across the dark. The bed was enormous, layered with soft linen sheets and a thick quilt that looked like it could swallow her whole. A single lamp cast a warm amber glow that made the walls seem to breathe. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded more final than it should have. She stood still for a long moment, clutching the strap of her delivery bag, listening. The mansion was silent now. No footsteps in the hall. No murmurs of distant conversations. Just the hum of a house that held too many secrets within its walls. She let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding, and finally set her bag down on the dresser. Her phone was inside, but the battery was nearly dead. She thought of her brother Malik, probably still awake, waiting for her to come home. She should have texted him, told him she'd be late. But what was she supposed to say? Hey, I scratched a Mafia boss's car and now I'm sleeping in his mansion. That wasn't exactly a text you could send without changing everything. She moved toward the bathroom attached to the room, flicking on the light to reveal marble countertops and spotless mirrors. A fluffy white towel sat neatly folded by the sink. She peeled off her soaked clothes, wrapped herself in the towel and stared at her reflection. Her hair was frizzy from the rain, her eyes tired but burning with a defiant spark. She whispered to herself, "Tomorrow, I'm leaving." The words sounded strong in the quiet room, but deep down, she wasn't sure who she was trying to convince, herself or the house. She slipped into the nightgown left folded at the foot of the bed. It was soft, probably more expensive than anything she'd ever worn. As she lay back on the bed, the quilt enveloped her in warmth, but sleep didn't come easily. Her mind replayed every moment of the night in sharp detail. The screech of her scooter against the Lamborghini, the look in Damien's eyes, the unsettling calm in his voice when he said she wasn't leaving. He wasn't like the men she'd encountered before. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His power came from the quiet assurance that the world would bend around his will. Across the mansion, Damien stood alone on the balcony outside his study, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving the air crisp and cool. He stared out at the city lights, distant but alive. His men had updated him on everything. The car had been towed for repairs, the security team had handled the onlookers outside the gate, and Maya had been settled into the East Wing. All loose ends tied, as always, and yet, for the first time in a long while, something about the night felt unfinished. He wasn't a man who believed in coincidences. His entire life had been built on controlling variables, predicting outcomes, ensuring nothing happened without his awareness. But tonight, a girl with nothing, no power, no wealth, no connections, had walked into his world by accident. And instead of fading into the background like most people would, she had stood in front of him with trembling hands but a steady voice, refusing to bow. That had intrigued him more than he cared to admit. He finished his drink and leaned against the railing, letting the cold air bite at his skin. He remembered his mother's words from long ago. People who walk into your life unexpectedly are either storms or mirrors. He hadn't understood it then. He did now. Maya Williams didn't know it, but she was both. A storm that had scraped against his carefully constructed world, and a mirror reflecting the parts of himself he'd buried under years of control. Back in the guest room, Maya tossed and turned. She wasn't used to soft beds. She grew up on creaky mattresses and thin blankets where sleep was a necessity, not a luxury. Here the quiet felt too loud. Her thoughts spun like the ceiling fan above her. She wondered what Damien wanted from her, why he hadn't simply scared her off or made her sign some kind of payment deal. Instead, he'd looked at her like someone examining a rare puzzle piece he hadn't realized he was missing. Around midnight, a soft knock came at her door. She sat up instantly, heart pounding. "Who is it?" she called, her voice cautious. "It's Luca," a man's voice replied. One of Damien's men, if she remembered correctly. "Signore Rossi wanted to make sure you're comfortable. If you need anything, there's a bell on the dresser." Maya stared at the door, unsure how to respond. "I'm fine," she finally said. "Good night." "Buonanotte," he replied, and his footsteps faded away. She let out a shaky breath. She wasn't used to being checked on, especially not by men who worked for someone like Damien. It was unsettling. Not because it was threatening, but because it wasn't. She lay back down and finally, slowly, exhaustion dragged her into sleep. But her dreams were uneasy. She saw the scratch on the Lamborghini, turning into a line of fire across the dark street. She saw Damien's eyes watching her through the rain. She saw Malik calling her name from far away, while a gate slowly closed between them. She woke up just before dawn, her heart racing, a thin sheen of sweat on her forehead. The first rays of morning light slipped through the curtains, painting the room in gold. For a moment she forgot where she was, then reality settled back in. She was still in his house, still caught in a story she hadn't agreed to enter. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands in her lap, and whispered to herself, "Today, I leave." But somewhere deep inside she knew, leaving wouldn't be as simple as walking out the door. The night outside the mansion had sunk into that deep silence that only comes when the rain has passed, and the city holds its breath between storms. Inside, the air carried the weight of old secrets and unspoken rules. Maya sat on the edge of a leather armchair in the sitting room adjoining the study, her wet jacket now draped over the back of a chair near the fire. One of Damien's house staff, an older woman with silver hair pulled into a neat bun, had silently appeared minutes earlier, offering her a towel and a steaming cup of tea with a grace that felt both comforting and intimidating. Maya had accepted it because refusing kindness here felt like refusing oxygen. Across from her, Damien had settled into his usual seat near the fire, the soft glow outlining his sharp features in gold and shadow. He wasn't looking at her. He stared into the fire like a man who spent more time in his thoughts than in his own words. It wasn't the silence of awkwardness. It was the kind that filled a room like a tide, inevitable and heavy. Maya wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into her cold fingers. Her mind raced with every possible scenario. Should she ask to leave? Would they even let her? Could she trust him when he said she could walk away? She wasn't naive. Men like Damien didn't become powerful by letting things slide. Yet, there was something about him that wasn't fitting the stories she'd heard whispered in the kitchens and alleyways. He didn't bark orders. He didn't threaten her outright. He observed, calculated, and disturbingly seemed genuinely interested in who she was. Finally, Damien broke the silence. "Do you know what the biggest mistake people make when they step into someone else's world?" His voice was low, reflective, not accusatory. Maya looked up cautiously. "They underestimate it." He tilted his head, a small approving flicker in his eyes. "Close, they assume it's temporary. They think they can step in, dip their toes, then step back out unchanged. But worlds like mine don't work that way. Once you walk in, whether you realize it or not, you leave something behind and you take something with you." Her grip on the cup tightened. "I didn't walk in," she said, her voice firmer than before. "I crashed into it. By accident." Damien finally looked at her, and the weight of his gaze was almost physical. "And yet," he said slowly, "here you are." There was no malice in his tone, just a disarming certainty that unsettled her more than anger ever could. She set the cup down, leaning forward slightly. "Why am I really here, Damien? If this was about the car, you'd have called your insurance company, or your people would have scared me into paying. This bringing me here, watching me like you're studying a chessboard, this is something else. What is it you want from me?" For a brief moment he didn't answer. He simply studied her, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. When he spoke, his words were slower, deliberate. "I don't know yet." The honesty in his answer caught her off guard. She expected manipulation, maybe some rehearsed speech about consequences. Not this. You don't know? Damien leaned back, a faint shadow of a smile crossing his lips. People come into my life for one of two reasons. They're either opportunities or threats. I'm trying to figure out which one you are. Maya's heartbeat quickened. I'm not either. I'm just a girl who scratched your car. He shook his head slowly. No, Maya, you're not just anything. People who are just something don't look me in the eye the way you are right now. They don't walk into my car without trembling. They don't question me like you just did. His voice softened, but the intensity didn't fade. You have fight, I see it. And that kind of fire either changes everything or burns out fast. The words hung between them, alive with unspoken meaning. Maya shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to take his observation as a compliment or a warning. The flames crackled, throwing moving shadows across the room. She thought of her mother, exhausted from double shifts, and her little brother sleeping alone in their small apartment, waiting for her to return. She had always been the protector, the one who didn't bend because she couldn't afford to. Now, sitting across from a man who could destroy lives with a single phone call, she wondered what kind of danger she had wandered into. Damien's gaze softened for just a moment, almost imperceptibly. When I was your age, he said quietly, I didn't have the luxury of accidents either. Every step I took had consequences. That's how I ended up here. That's why I can't ignore someone like you crossing my path. Maya frowned. So what, you think it's destiny? He shrugged slightly, a gesture more philosophical than arrogant. Call it what you want, but I've learned to listen when life drops something unexpected in my path. Her eyes narrowed slightly. And what if life didn't drop me? What if I just happened to make a mistake in the wrong place at the wrong time? Damien leaned forward then, his elbows on his knees, eyes locking onto hers with unsettling precision. Then you're the most interesting mistake that's ever happened to me. The air between them thickened, not with flirtation but with intensity. A strange, silent battle was unfolding, her instinct to run clashing with his instinct to understand. She wasn't sure which force was stronger. Before she could respond, one of his men appeared at the doorway, his posture formal. Signore Rossi, he said quietly. The car's been taken care of. The security team wants your instructions for tomorrow. Damien didn't look away from Maya. Tell them to wait. The man nodded and disappeared as silently as he came. Damien's attention remained fixed on her, like everything else could wait. You're not leaving tonight, he said finally. Maya's eyes widened. Excuse me? It's late. You're exhausted, and whether you want to admit it or not, walking out of this gate right now would put you in more danger than staying here. His voice wasn't threatening. It was maddeningly calm. People saw you come here, Maya. In my world, that matters. She stood slowly, anger bubbling beneath her fear. So I'm trapped? His expression didn't change. You're safe. There's a difference. She wanted to argue, to scream, to demand he let her leave. But the rational part of her, the part that had kept her alive through every hard year, recognized the truth in his words. Being seen entering Damien Rossi's mansion was not something the city's underworld ignored. Whether she liked it or not, her life had taken a turn she couldn't just walk away from. Damien rose too, their height difference more pronounced now. I'll have a room prepared for you, he said. You can rest. Tomorrow we'll talk. No games, no threats. Just truth. She stared at him, searching for the lie in his words, for the trap. But all she found was that same unnerving certainty, the kind that made her wonder whether this man saw farther into people than they wanted to admit. Finally, she exhaled. Fine, she said quietly. But tomorrow I leave. His eyes held hers steady. We'll see. The rain had started to ease into a softer drizzle, but the tension in the narrow alley had only grown heavier, as if the night itself held its breath. Maya stared at the sleek black Lamborghini, its engine still silent, its wounded side gleaming beneath the streetlight like a reminder of her irreversible mistake. Damien Rossi's voice still lingered in the air, calm, commanding, almost casual. Get in. 2 words, yet they weighed more than anything she'd ever heard in her life. She glanced at the 3 men who flanked the alley like shadows given human shape. Their faces were expressionless, but their posture was enough. This wasn't a request. It was a statement of what was about to happen. Maya's pulse raced in her ears. Her instincts screamed to turn, to run, to vanish into the maze of wet streets. But a quiet, unshakable thought cut through the panic. Running wouldn't help. Not with men like this. Not with someone like him. She was a delivery girl with a scooter that barely reached 30 miles an hour. These men were predators in tailored suits. There was no escape route that didn't end badly. So she swallowed hard, lifted her chin the way she'd learned to do when life tried to crush her, and took a single step forward. Damien opened the passenger door himself, a gesture so unexpected it made her hesitate. His movements were smooth, deliberate, not rushed like a man reacting out of anger, but measured like someone executing a plan he'd already thought through. "You're soaked," he said softly, almost like an observation rather than concern. "You'll ruin the leather seats if you keep standing there." His eyes narrowed, not in impatience but in subtle challenge. Maya hesitated only a heartbeat more before she slipped inside. The car's interior was warm, smelling faintly of leather and some expensive cologne she couldn't name. It was the kind of space that didn't belong to her world. She adjusted awkwardly, water dripping from her clothes onto the spotless floor mats, the seat hugging her like a glove tailored for someone richer. Someone else. Damien slid into the driver's seat beside her. The door closed with a solid, satisfying thud that sounded eerily like a lock clicking shut. The engine roared to life, smooth and deep, making her feel as though the car itself had awakened. None of the men in suits joined them. They melted back into the night like they'd never existed. Maya shot Damien a quick, nervous glance. Where are we going?" Her voice came out quieter than she expected. He didn't look at her right away. His hands rested on the steering wheel with ease, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "You scratched something worth more than most houses in this city," he said, his voice steady. "I need to know who you are." "I don't like unanswered questions." "That's it?" she asked. "You could have just called me." A faint smile touched his lips, not amused, more like he was intrigued by her defiance. "And missed the chance to talk to the girl who didn't beg or run? That would be boring." The Lamborghini slid out of the alley like a panther, gliding into the near-empty streets of the city. Maya clutched the strap of her delivery bag, her knuckles pale. Buildings flashed past in a blur of wet neon. Every block they passed took her farther from her familiar roots, deeper into a world she'd only ever heard whispers about. She didn't know if she should be terrified or strangely, inexplicably curious. Damien finally glanced at her. "Maya Williams," he said, testing the sound of her name. 22. Delivery girl, lives on the south side, younger brother. Mother works double shifts. Her head snapped toward him in shock.
"How?"
"Information travels," he replied simply, "especially when you know where to look." He turned a corner, the engine humming like a caged beast.
"You see, Maya, I don't like accidents."
"Everything in my world happens for a reason. So when a stranger damages something of mine, I need to understand why." She forced herself to meet his gaze. It wasn't because of anything. It was raining. "I slipped." "Maybe," he said softly. "Or maybe life decided to bring you to me." His tone wasn't flirtatious. It was reflective, unsettlingly calm, as if he genuinely believed in some kind of fate. It unnerved her more than threats would have. The car slowed as they entered a district she had never seen up close. Ornate old buildings, iron gates, and quiet streets that looked nothing like the noise and hustle she knew. They pulled up to a mansion. Not a modern glass and steel one, but a stone structure that looked like it had been standing for centuries, hidden behind high black gates. Security cameras followed every angle, and 2 guards at the entrance straightened the moment Damien's car appeared. Maya's breath caught. "Why are we here?" she asked. "Because you've stepped into my world now," Damien answered, turning off the engine. "And I don't let people leave until I understand them." He stepped out, walked around, and opened her door. The drizzle had stopped, replaced by a heavy stillness that pressed against her skin. She climbed out, trying to keep her back straight, even though every instinct screamed that she was wildly out of place. The mansion loomed above her like a silent witness. Its windows were dark except for the warm golden glow spilling from the entrance. Damien gestured toward the massive doors. "After you." She didn't move. "I came to say sorry about a car," she said carefully. "Not to... whatever this is." For the first time, Damien's expression shifted into something sharper. Not anger, but authority. "And I came out to meet a stranger who touched something I value," he said. "That's not small in my world, Maya. But if you prefer, you can leave now." He stepped aside, motioning toward the gate. The guards watched silently, their presence a reminder that leaving wouldn't exactly be as simple as walking out. "But if you do," he added softly. Our business remains unfinished. And unfinished business has a way of finding people. Even months later, it wasn't a threat screamed with fury. It was whispered with quiet certainty, and that made it far more real. Maya's stomach twisted. She took a slow breath. Fine, she said, her voice firm despite her fear. I'll hear you out. A flicker, just the smallest glint of satisfaction, passed through his eyes. Good choice. He led her up the stone steps into the mansion. The doors opened without him even touching them. An older man in a crisp black suit, clearly some kind of butler, had anticipated his arrival. The moment Maya stepped inside, the world outside disappeared. Warm light spilled across polished wood floors. A grand staircase curved upward like something out of a movie. The air smelled faintly of old books, cigars, and expensive wine. Every inch of the space radiated power, not the kind that screamed for attention, but the kind that didn't need to. Maya felt like she'd crossed into a parallel universe. She tightened her grip on her bag, forcing herself not to shrink. She'd spent her life moving through spaces where people looked past her. Here she felt as though the walls themselves were watching. Damien walked ahead, unhurried, like a king returning to his castle. He stopped in a large sitting room filled with dark wood, leather chairs, and a crackling fireplace. He gestured for her to sit. Make yourself comfortable. She stayed standing. I'm not staying long. He tilted his head slightly, studying her like an interesting puzzle. That's what makes this so fascinating, he said quietly. Most people who walk through those doors either want something from me or owe me something they can never repay. You, on the other hand, stumbled here by accident. And yet, his gaze lingered on her, steady, unreadable. I can't shake the feeling that it wasn't an accident at all. The mansion was alive in its own way. As Maya followed Damien through the wide hallway, every step echoed softly against the polished floors, and every painting along the walls seemed to observe her silently. The portraits weren't modern or decorative, they were old. Oil-painted faces of men and women from a different era, their gazes stern and knowing, like witnesses to a legacy that stretched beyond generations. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light that reflected off golden frames and deep mahogany furniture. It was beautiful, but not comforting. It felt like stepping into a story she hadn't been invited to, one that already had rules, written long before her arrival. Damien walked ahead, with the effortless confidence of someone who never needed to explain his presence anywhere. Maya kept a careful distance, clutching her bag, her wet shoes leaving faint marks on the floor. She could still feel the weight of the guard's eyes behind her, even though they hadn't followed inside. Her heart pounded with a rhythm she tried to control, but each corner they turned reminded her she was deeper inside a world she didn't understand. And farther away from everything familiar, they entered a vast study that looked like something out of an old European estate. Dark wood bookshelves stretched to the ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes. A massive fireplace crackled, spreading a glow that softened the edges of the room but didn't erase the gravity in the air. A large desk sat near the center, and behind it a single chair awaited Damien like a throne. He didn't sit, though. He walked to the bar cart, poured himself a glass of something amber, and turned toward her. Sit, he said, not unkindly, but with an authority that made it clear refusal wasn't really an option. Maya hesitated, then chose a chair near the edge of the room. Not the expensive-looking leather armchair near the fireplace, but a simpler one by a side table. She sat upright, her posture defensive but composed. She didn't want to appear scared, even if fear pulsed beneath her skin. Damien took a slow sip of his drink, watching her over the rim of his glass. You're not like most people who find themselves here, he said finally. I shouldn't be here at all, she replied. I scratched a car. That's it. I left a note. I would have worked to pay for it. I didn't sign up for whatever this is. His lips curved slightly. That's exactly why you are here, Maya. Most people panic. They beg, they make excuses, they disappear. But you, he gestured toward her. You wrote a note. You stood your ground. You walked into a stranger's car when you knew you couldn't run. That tells me you understand something most people don't. She crossed her arms, still soaked from the rain. It tells you I didn't want to get chased through the streets by men in suits. Damien chuckled softly, setting his glass down. Maybe, but I think there's more. People who grow up fighting for every inch of their life. They don't waste energy on theatrics, they act. You remind me of someone, Maya frowned. Who? My mother, he said simply. His tone wasn't nostalgic, it was controlled, like someone touching an old scar. She came to this country with nothing. No English. No safety net. She cleaned other people's houses while raising 3 sons. She had fire. She didn't bend easily. Neither do you. The unexpected vulnerability in his voice disarmed her more than his power ever could. For a fleeting moment, the air between them shifted. Not soft, but layered with something human. That's nice, she said awkwardly, unsure how to respond. She wasn't used to powerful men comparing her to the people they respected. Damien stepped closer, his movements deliberate but not threatening. You don't have to like me, he said quietly. But understand this, in my world, accidents are rarely just accidents. Paths cross for a reason, and whether you realize it or not, Maya Williams, your life intersected with mine tonight in a way neither of us can ignore. Her pulse jumped at his words. There was something unsettling in the way he spoke, like fate wasn't just a poetic idea to him, but a strategy he lived by. She leaned back slightly, choosing her words carefully. I don't believe in fate, she said. I believe in choices. And my choice was to finish my shift, go home, and sleep. This, she gestured around the room, isn't my story. For the first time, his eyes hardened, not in anger, but with a kind of quiet certainty. It might not have been, he said softly, but it is now. Maya stiffened. What is that supposed to mean? Damien didn't answer immediately. He walked toward the desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a folder. When he turned it around, she saw her own name typed neatly on the front. He placed it on the table between them. I make it a point to know who steps into my orbit, he said. This is everything about you, your work history, your address, your family. It took less than an hour. A chill ran down her spine. You're stalking me now? I'm protecting myself, he replied calmly. In my position, trust isn't given. It's earned. I need to know if you're a problem waiting to happen. Or something else. Something else? She echoed. Damien's eyes lingered on her, unwavering. People either disrupt my life or become part of it. You'll have to decide which one you're going to be. Maya's breath caught. She wasn't used to anyone speaking to her like that. Not with threat, not with flirtation, but with an eerie blend of both, wrapped in certainty. Her life had been simple in its hardships. Deliver food, care for her family, survive each day. Now she was staring at a man whose world operated by entirely different rules, and somehow, without meaning to, she had stepped into his storm. Rain poured over Chicago like an endless curtain, turning the cracked pavement into a glistening mirror of neon lights and trembling shadows. The late-night hum of the city had quieted into that strange in-between silence, when most honest people were already home. But the restless hearts and hidden powers of the night began to stir. It was in this hour that Maya Williams, soaked to the bone, steered her aging red scooter through the narrow back streets behind West Monroe. She had one more delivery left, one more ride before she could go home to the small one-bedroom apartment she shared with her mother and younger brother. Her hands were numb from the cold, but her mind was clear. Get the food delivered, get paid, and pray the scooter didn't give up on her tonight. Maya was 22, with sharp eyes that saw the world for what it was, not what it pretended to be. Life had taught her early that luck favored the wealthy, and the rest had to rely on stubbornness. She wore a cheap plastic poncho over her delivery jacket, but the rain had found every weak spot, seeping through until her jeans clung to her skin. Her curls, usually a crown of confidence, were now plastered to her forehead. But she didn't complain. She had learned to find rhythm even in discomfort. She turned a corner, headlights briefly catching a black shape parked along the curb. At first, she didn't notice. It was just another car in the shadows. But then her scooter's back tire slid on a slick patch. The handle jerked in her grip, and for a horrifying second she lost control. The scooter veered sideways, scraping along something solid. The sound, a sharp metallic screech, cut through the rain like a scream. Maya's heart plummeted. When the scooter stopped, she turned to see it. A long, ugly white scratch carved along the side of a sleek black Lamborghini. Her breath caught. Oh, no, no, no. Please, not this car, she whispered, her voice trembling as the rain pounded against her helmet. Her words came out like a prayer that was already too late. The car gleamed beneath the flickering streetlight like some predator in the dark. Elegant, powerful, untouchable, and now wounded. She stumbled off the scooter, clutching her delivery bag awkwardly. The scratch stretched nearly 3 feet along the side panel. Her stomach twisted into knots. This wasn't some dusty old sedan. This was a machine worth more than her entire future earnings combined. Her mind scrambled. Run? Cry? Call someone? But she had always been her mother's daughter, raised to face her mistakes, no matter how terrifying. With shaking hands, she dug through her delivery bag, pulling out a crumpled napkin and the stub of a pen she used to collect signatures. The napkin was already damp, but she wrote as clearly as she could, "I'm so sorry. I'll pay for repairs. Please call me." Then she added her name and number, Maya Williams. She tucked the note carefully under the windshield wiper, her fingers trembling as thunder cracked overhead. Her heart pounded so loud she could barely hear the rain. She took a step back, ready to slip into the alley and disappear into the night. But then, footsteps slow, deliberate, impossibly steady. The kind of footsteps that didn't rush for anyone. They approached from the dark mouth of the alley like something inevitable. Maya froze. She turned slowly, and what she saw stole the warmth from her blood. A man emerged from the shadows, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a tailored charcoal suit that looked untouched by the rain. The storm seemed to bend around him rather than soak him. His dark hair was slicked back, and the water traced sharp cheekbones and a jawline like cut marble. But it was his eyes, dark with a faint glimmer of gold that pinned her in place. They held a calm intensity that said he wasn't just someone who lived in this city. He owned parts of it. Behind him, 3 men in black suits stepped out, their formation precise and silent. They spread out like practice choreography, blocking every exit without a word. Maya's throat went dry. This wasn't some angry car owner. This was something else. Someone else. The man's voice slid through the rain, low, smooth, with a faint Italian accent. "Leaving so soon?" Maya swallowed hard. Her instincts screamed danger, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "I left a note," she said, her voice wobbling but not breaking. "I'll pay for the damage." He walked past her without replying, his shoes somehow unbothered by the puddles. He stopped by the Lamborghini, ran his fingers along the white scratch slowly, almost tenderly, like someone tracing a scar. Then he turned back to her, his lips curling, not into a smile but something sharper. "Do you know what this is?" he asked softly. "An expensive mistake," Maya whispered. For a second, something like amusement flickered in his eyes. A 2023 Lamborghini Huracan, custom imported, everything about it is perfection. That scratch is 6 figures worth of damage. The word slammed into her like a physical blow. 6 figures. She barely had $60 in her bank account. Her breath came fast. But somewhere deep inside, that stubborn spark flared again. She lifted her chin slightly. "Then I'll be paying it off for the rest of my life," she said quietly. "But I'll pay it." The men behind him exchanged subtle glances. The tall man's expression shifted. Something softened almost imperceptibly. "Most people who damage my property either beg," he said, stepping closer, "or they run. You've done neither." Maya held his gaze, though her legs trembled beneath her. "Begging won't fix your car, and running won't fix my life." For the first time he laughed. It was a low, rich sound that echoed off the wet brick walls. Not cruel, just surprised. "What's your name?" "Maya Williams." "I'm Damian Rossi." He said it like a declaration, as if the name itself carried weight. And it did. Maya had heard it whispered before. In the kitchens of restaurants she delivered from, in the corners of late-night bus rides, in the stories of men who disappeared after crossing certain lines. Rossi was a name that traveled through Chicago's underworld like smoke. A name people didn't say loudly if they wanted to sleep peacefully. And now she stood alone, dripping rain, having scratched the car of that man. Damian studied her for a long, uncomfortable moment, as if he were peeling back the layers of who she was with nothing but his eyes. Then he said, almost softly, "Get in."